Welcome to the deep dive. So you've been sending over some really interesting stuff on process improvement.
Yeah, delving into how things get better systematically.
And one thing that keeps popping up is this framework, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check Act.
That's the one, also called the Deming cycle. It's pretty foundational, especially if you look at, say, lean manufacturing or industrial engineering.
Toyota production system, right? It's core to that.
Absolutely, a real cornerstone.
Okay, so for this deep dive, let's really try to get our heads around it. What is PDCA? Why is it considered so vital? And, how do you actually use each step properly?
That sounds like a plan. So, first step, plan.
Plan. Makes sense to start there. What does that involve?
Well, fundamentally, it's about identifying either a problem you need to solve or maybe an opportunity you see for improvement.
Okay, so finding the what.
Exactly, and then defining your objectives, like what does better actually look like? What specific results are you shooting for?
And figuring out the process changes needed to get there.
Precisely. How are you going to achieve those objectives? And critically, you need to establish your expected outputs. Be really clear about what you anticipate.
Right, I picked up on that from the materials. It's not just vague improvement, it's defining the expected results. Why is that so important?
Because that's your benchmark. How else will you know later in the check phase if your plan actually worked as intended?
Good point. Keeps it measurable.
Yeah. And this planning stage, it's not done in a vacuum. It involves a lot of communication.
Getting buy-in.
Definitely. Detailing the purpose, having thorough discussions, building consensus around the goals. Everyone needs to be on board.
And I saw something about formulating hypotheses. That sounds a bit formal.
It sounds but it's really just making an educated guess. If we implement this change, we predict this specific outcome.
Ah, okay. So you're setting up what you'll test later.
Exactly. It makes the check phase much more rigorous. You're not just looking at results, you're comparing them to your predictions.
Gotcha. And planning the timing is part of this too.
Yep. Setting realistic timelines for this cycle.
Yeah.
Interestingly, one source mentioned Japanese companies often spend a significant chunk of time right here in planning.
Really? Why is that?
The belief is that really thorough planning makes the next phase, the do phase, much smoother and faster. Invest time up front.
That makes me think of that Einstein quote. Something about saving the world.
Oh yeah. If I had an hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution.
That's the one. Really hammers home the value of planning.
Okay, so we've planned meticulously. What's next?
Do is next. This is where you actually implement the plan you just created.
Putting it into action.
Right. But crucially, the advice is often to do it on a small scale first. Think pilot project.
Like a test run.
Exactly. Or a prototype. Test it out in a controlled way before you go big.
So maybe try a new procedure with just one team or test new equipment in one area.
Precisely. And while you're doing it, you need to be watching closely, monitoring, documenting.
What kind of things are you documenting? Any issues that crop up, anything unexpected, and really importantly, collecting data on the metrics you defined back in the plan phase.
Ah, okay, so gathering the evidence for the next step.
You got it. That data is vital for check. And like we said, if the planning was solid, this do phase can often go quite quickly, staying in that sort of prototype stage.
Makes sense. Test, observe, collect data. So assuming we've done that, we move to check. This was flagged as really important in the sources, right?
Vitally important.
Yeah.
This is where the real learning happens, where an organization can become, a learning organization.
How so? What happens in check?
You take all that data you collected during do, and you analyze it. You compare the actual results against those expected outcomes from the plan phase.
So did we hit the target we set?
Exactly. You're looking for gaps, deviations. Where did reality differ from the plan?
And you also assess the plan itself? Like, was it even the right plan?
Good point, yes.
Yeah.
Was the hypothesis sound? Did the process change actually address the root cause?
I saw a suggestion about charting the data.
Yeah, visualizing it can really help spot trends. Is the process getting more stable? Is variability decreasing or increasing?
And the sources mention this step often gets skipped or rushed.
Sadly, yes. There's often this push to just keep doing, to implement. People sometimes bypass the rigorous checking.
Which means you lose the learning opportunity.
Completely. It's like running an experiment and throwing away the results.
The material had some good guiding questions for check, didn't it?
It did. Things like, is it working like we predicted? Did it actually happen the way we planned? If not, why not? What caused that gap?
And the big one, what did we learn from this?
That's the core of it. Turning that experience, successful or not, into actual knowledge. Without that reflection, you're just guessing.
Okay, solid check done. We've analyzed, compared, hopefully learned something. Now what? Act, or sometimes adjust.
Right, act or adjust. What you do here depends entirely on what you found in the check phase.
So if the check showed the plan worked, success.
If it worked, if the results are good and match or exceed expectations, then you act by standardizing the change.
Making it the new normal.
Exactly. Update procedures, communicate it widely, train people, make that successful change the standard way of operating.
Okay, but what if check showed it didn't work? Or maybe even made things worse?
Then act becomes adjust. You take what you learned, why it didn't work, what the issues were, and you revise the original plan.
And then?
Then you go back to the beginning, you start a new PDCA cycle with a revised plan. Plan, do, check, act, adjust again.
Ah, so it really is a cycle, not just a linear process.
Absolutely not linear, it's iterative, continuous improvement. And the sources emphasize that the new standard you set, it's just the current best process.
Not the final answer.
Nope. It's the baseline for the next round of improvement, triggered by another PDCA cycle. You move from one standard to a better one continuously.
That cyclical nature really makes sense for driving ongoing improvement. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. We've seen the steps. Why is PDCA considered such a big deal in these fields?
Well, a few key reasons came through in the materials. First, it gives you a systematic approach. It's structured problem solving, not just random trial and error.
Right, it imposes some discipline on the process.
Definitely. And because it is a cycle, it inherently fosters continuous improvement. It builds that ongoing enhancement into the way you work.
Not just a one-off fix.
Exactly. And the do's and check parts are crucial for experimentation and learning. You're actively testing ideas, gathering data, figuring out what works and what doesn't. Even failures provide valuable information.
Learning from mistakes, essentially.
Or just learning from deviations. Plus, the act phase, when successful, leads to standardization. That's huge for making sure improvements stick.
So the gains aren't lost over time.
Precisely. And another point was employee engagement. When you involve people in the process identifying problems, testing solutions, they feel more ownership. It helps build that culture of learning.
Yeah, people support what they help create.
That's often true. And finally, it's adaptability. PDCA isn't rigid. You can apply it to all sorts of problems, big or small, simple or complex.
That flexibility must be really useful.
Especially today, things change so fast. You need flexible tools.
Okay, so it sounds powerful, but surely there are ways it can go wrong. Common mistakes or things to watch out for.
Oh, for sure. The biggest one highlighted was organizations getting stuck on do. They love the action part.
So they jump into implementing things.
Without enough plan, then they rush or skip check and don't properly act by standardizing or adjusting based on the results.
Ah, neglecting the other three phases.
Exactly. And Deming himself really stressed the need for balance. You can't just focus on one part. Rushing planning, overdoing do, ignoring check, underinvesting in act that undermines the whole point.
It has to be treated as a whole system.
Right. Deming saw it almost like the scientific method applied to business and industry.
How so?
Well, plan is formulating your hypothesis. Do is running the experiment. Check is observing and analyzing the results. Act is drawing conclusions and deciding the next steps based on the evidence.
That's a great way to think about it. It brings that rigor.
It does. It emphasizes that PDCA isn't just a checklist, it's a way of thinking scientifically about change and improvement.
Okay, so summing this up, PDCA is this fundamental iterative loop plan: do, check, act, adjust. It's about structured thinking, testing, learning from data, and then acting decisively.
Yeah, and it really pushes for that scientific mindset toward making things better, balancing all the phases and committing to continuous learning and adapting. It's not about finding one perfect solution, but about constantly striving for the next improvement.
Okay, a lot to chew on there. So here's a final thought for you, the listener. Think about these PDCA principles: the planning, the small tests, the data checking, the standardizing or adjusting. How could you maybe apply that thinking not just to a factory floor, but maybe to a personal goal you have, or a project your team is working on? What little experiments could you run in your own world to try and drive some real improvement?
Interesting challenge.
Definitely something to consider. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.